This week on the Life Well podcast.
Engaged with your identity in the way that God made you and the gifts that he gave you, your insecurity on a basketball court, yes, valid. You're not bouncing like all the other balls, but it's because you're not a basketball. If they take you to Raymond James Stadium, you're going to be having a fabulous time. Why? Because you're a football. You're going to get in the hands of someone who knows what to do with who you are. If you're in the wrong hands, welcome back to the Life Well podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Young, and we're continuing in our 3-part series on right relationships. I begged and pleaded in the opening of the last one for you to at least see the first one through, because the content that we get on relationship, we're in an oversaturated market when it comes to talking about relationships. And honestly, if I could have come up with a different name for the series, I would have, but I couldn't. So here we are. If you saw the first episode and now you're curious about the rest, so that found you here. I'm so excited. We're going to keep chatting. Again, I hope I have your attention. Last time, we focused on our primary, exclusive, and dependent relationship on a never-failing, all-loving, unchanging Father. And now I want to talk about another kind of relationship. Our attachment styles have been identified. We figured out what they are, but we're not letting them define us. We're just letting them inform us. If you haven't listened to that episode and you don't know what I'm talking about, like about definitions and information, I really do recommend that you pause this one, you go back and you watch that one, and then you come back. But if you already saw it and you trust me just a teensy-weensy bit, let's keep rocking. Today, we're diving into something that is just as important. It's our secondary, validating, hard to define, weird to love, too much independence relationship with ourselves. Today, we're going to talk about identity, some insecurity, self-care, selfishness, some self-love, and everything in between, not from the world's perspective, but of course, at the intersection of your faith and your mental health. Let's explore on how not knowing who you are damages your mind, how caring for ourselves in order to get other people's approval does nothing for your mind, and what a loving God can do for how we see ourselves. So there comes a point in everyone's life around age 25, 26, where your frontal lobe just develops, okay? It just clicks and clarity emerges. And it's like you can see that the world is brighter and the rain is gone and you can actually see clearly now. And we joke about this. And when I say we, I mean like my coworkers and I. But sometimes all that clarity can be overwhelming. Or maybe your frontal lobe has been developed for several years and you haven't come to terms with the all too familiar realization that you don't take care of yourself. You take care of everybody else, but you don't actually take care of you. I recently had a moment where I realized I was pouring into and only motivated by like external factors. And one of those factors, of course, being other people. I completely just like neglected myself. And I didn't think that was the case because externally, like I was doing most of the things. The first thing to go off my like take care of myself to-do list is my nails. Obviously, they're done now because I knew I had something to do. But when I start to feel a little fatigue in the membrane, the nails are off of the list. Okay. The outfits start to get really sweatpants and not in the cute like 2-piece set kind of way. Like I wore these in high school to gym and here's a t-shirt from a couple of years ago kind of way. And we realized that we're not taking care of ourselves. I learned, and I told you guys, my disorganized attachment style with Jesus also like translates to how I treat myself. And I started feeling really drained, really disconnected. And I realized it was because I hadn't been caring for myself. And I can imagine that you can relate to that. Why? Because if you've ever feel like you're running on empty, it's probably because you are, right? Cars don't just stop running when they're full of gas. If you have what you need, you're going to do what you should do. But if you don't have what you need, you're not going to do what you should do. And have you ever gotten to the end of your well? We talk about wells a lot here at the Life Well podcast. Have you ever like reached into yourself for help and you realized that nothing was there? Well, even as a devoted Christian who has a good relationship with their Heavenly Father, you're in the boat with me and you're not taking care of yourself. I, however, would like to get out the boat. Okay. Are you down with that? Let's get out. In a world that constantly tells us, hustle harder, grind, the early bird gets the worm. Ugh. Every day? Is this bird getting up every day to get the same worm? Self-care can feel like a luxury. Like you got to have the money and the time in order to take care of yourself instead of a necessity. And self-love is often reduced to surface level practices like taking a bubble bath or buying something nice for yourself. And when you don't have the time to run that water or the money to pay for it, and if you don't have the money to go get this $400 massage that everybody's saying is just going to drain all your lymph nodes and you'll if you don't have those resources, you might feel like I can't take care of myself. But self-care and self-love goes so much deeper. So we're going to unpack this at my favorite spot. You could guess it, the intersection of your faith and your mental health. Let's start off with identifying why your mental health is so important. Psychologists emphasize that your identity forms the foundation of your mind. Erik Erikson, he's an OG, okay, in the field of psychology. He's best known for his psychosocial stages of development. This framework, it highlights that knowing who you are is critical for building confidence and resilience. What is resilience? The ability to keep going, to bounce back and then persevere, rebound and recovery. When our sense of identity is unclear, you're more susceptible to anxiety and depression and the need for external validation. If you don't, let's say we were all like sports equipment. If you deeply desire to function well as a basketball, but your actual makeup is a football, you're going to get really insecure when they throw you down on the ground. You're not going to bounce because you're not a basketball. So when you're not deeply engaged with your identity in the way that God made you and the gifts that he gave you, your insecurity on a basketball court, yes, valid. You're not bouncing like all the other balls, but it's because you're not a basketball. If they take you to Raymond James Stadium, you're going to be having a fabulous time. Why? Because you're a football. You're going to get in the hands of someone who knows what to do with who you are. If you're in the wrong hands, do I have to, you get what I'm saying, right? So we're more susceptible to anxiety and depression and the need for external validation when we lack identity. Now, does this guarantee that you're going to have some kind of diagnosis because you lack identity? No. But it does indicate that there's an opening, a crack in the foundation of your well, if you will, okay? Without a properly constructed well, even living water is going to spill out. If those bricks and the sediment that it takes to keep it all formulated together, you could put the best Kool-Aid money can buy in that well. It's going to start to seep into other areas. And when someone, even you, digs in there to get something out, it's going to be empty. When we don't know our identity, we often let other people define it for us. You might even want a label or crave an association to validate your existence. And unfortunately, this can lead to people pleasing, okay? A little bit of perfectionism or constantly chasing achievements in order to feel valuable, which unfortunately, that's just going to leave you feeling much worse. According to Erik Erikson, you have to be in some kind of awareness of why you were made in order to feel valuable to the life that you are living. And we learn that when you're not in right relationship with God, all this gets thrown off. Okay. So let me talk to my people who thinks that this doesn't apply to them. You listened to the first episode in this series and you said, okay, Catherine, I'm gonna hear you out. You're here now and you're like, I love myself. I don't really need this. Okay. You know who God is. I love that. You pray, you fast, you even pay your tithes. But you avoid self-identity development because you do religion well. You take your car to the shop before you get on the road. You are a real adult. Only people I know who do that are like my mama. Okay. Anytime she has to travel, she gets her oil changed, even if she doesn't need one. That's so grown up. But do you know how irresponsible it would be for you to not also stop for gas? Yeah, I'm glad that you're taking care of those major parts of your vehicle. Your transmission is great. Your alignment is great. Your tire, you bought new tires. You know how expensive it is to buy 4 new tires? I love that you're doing all of those things well, but you don't have any gas. You got the best car on the road, but you can't go anywhere because you're empty. That's not good news, is it? Well, I have more things to add to that. The importance of self-care, we can see that when we really start to get to the mental health side of this intersection. Once you establish a self, who you are, then you can take care of that self, this earthen vessel that we talked about in episode number 1. Self-care is not just about luxury or indulgence. It is that at times, but that's not the only thing. Scientifically, it is a way to maintain your mental and your physical health. Research shows that practices like prayer, okay, getting into that prayer closet, exercise. We talked about my Planet Fitness gym membership. Have you been using yours? Before you ask me if I use mine, did you use yours? Because exercise is good for your mental health. We want to make sure that we're doing the things to reduce that stress hormone in your body, getting enough rest. When you get in that bed, do you close your eyes or do you unlock your phone? Which one of those things is more likely to happen? Because I can almost guess what your next day is going to be like, depending on what your night was like before. Our emotional regulation has to be tended to. Self-care goes beyond what feels good in the moment. It's about long-term well-being. Now, I have some friends who enjoy a good workout and it feels good in the moment to them. They can't say that about me. I enjoy the endorphins at the end, but I have yet to find a workout that I enjoy but the long-term well-being, choosing to do the thing that nurtures your mind and your body and your spirit, that is self-care. If you're anything like me, you've often been plagued by the tempting thought when you're on the way home and you only have 1 bar of gas left. You know what I'm about to say. Say it with me. I'm just get gas in the morning. Okay. Even if the next morning goes exactly how you envision it, which it rarely does, it still feels inconvenient to respond to the demand for gas for that car or vessel at that time. Our bodies and minds are the same way. Self-care isn't waiting around until you burn out. Self-care is not waiting around until you stress out. You probably shouldn't wait until you crash out to go take that bath, okay? To go to that gym, to call that doctor, to get that blood work done, to call your friend and yap on the phone and have girl dinner and do whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself. Because once you stress out, once you burn out, once you crash out, the repair is way more expensive than the initial care you could have taken. Another thing we need to talk about when it comes to you being in right relationship with yourself is self-love and self-compassion. There's research on self-compassion and it highlights 3 main components: mindfulness, self-kindness, and a sense of shared humanity. Most people get the mindfulness part correct. I'd say a good portion of those people get the kindness part correct. But this shared sense of humanity, that's where I lose most people. Self-compassion is correlated with lower levels of depression, though. When you're kinder to yourself, you're depressed less. When you make a mistake and you don't think it's because you're inherently a terrible person, you're not going to be as sad. Same thing with anxiety. Those levels are lower because you have a higher emotional resilience. When you fail, self-compassion allows you to recover faster. It reframes your mistakes. It's not like defining laws, but it's opportunities to grow. It's called cognitive reframing. That's what therapy is about. Again, shameless plug for therapy. I love that y'all watch these videos. I watch these videos. Sometimes I go back and play it for my own hearing. But we really need to be doing this deep work with a clinically trained professional. So just a shameless plug here. Take yourself to therapy. That is self-care as well. Something else that we need to talk about with this self-love is your relationship with yourself needs to kind of be like the relationship advice that you didn't really want to hear when you turned on this episode, but you need to do that for you. Okay, when you're in poor relationship with yourself, you do what every relationship expert says not to do on the first date. You lead with your baggage to you, okay? And then you assume that you shouldn't like you because of your baggage. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've been on a first date before and that 5 minutes when you sit down, they tell you every terrible thing that has ever happened to them and how they expect you to not like them because of those things. I mean, are you staying for the dinner? So why is it when you reflect on yourself, you just repeat all the terrible things you've ever done and justify why you don't deserve love in the future from you or anybody else? That doesn't sound like a fun date. You want to crack crab legs with somebody who's just telling you all that stuff. So why do you do it? to yourself. We do that in prayer. We do that in prayer. We just tear ourselves down, hoping that God's not going to do it. We beat him to the punch because we know how lowly we are. So we just tear ourselves down so that God doesn't do it. But what if he's not trying to do that? Because I can guarantee you, he already knows, but he does not see you that way. We think we know it all. And thank God we don't get paid for thinking. Because the good news is, God is not like that. And I can prove it. The Bible teaches us that our identity is not rooted in what we do, but in what God says that we are. Genesis 1:27 says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Now, I want you to think about the last thing you said about yourself. I know what mine was. Do you think God is like that? Should you say that? Would you say that about him? Think about it. Because I know the last thing I said about myself, I wouldn't say about God, but yet I say it about myself. But right here, it just says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. This means we are inherently valuable because we reflect his image. Same thing in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. Paul writes, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Knowing this, we can let go of striving to prove our worth and just rest in the purpose that he has for us. Self-care can be seen as stewardship. The Bible encourages us to care for our bodies and minds because they are gifts from God. 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. Paul reminds us, do you not know? We talked about this already, but I understand why he started the scripture this way with a question. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit? Like, it sounds like he's saying, like, you silly goose. Who is in you, whom you've received from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price. Therefore, honor God with your body. Self-care isn't vanity. And I can remember being a little girl, I thought if I was confident, then that meant that I was like big-headed. If I loved the way that I looked and I thought I did a really good job on an exam, or I did my very best on a performance when I danced, and that meant that I was thinking I was better than other people. So the only way I thought I could balance that was by hating myself and putting everybody else above me. But no, that's not what God is saying. Self-care, taking care of you, that's not vain. It's stewardship. Because by caring for you, you're caring for your relationship with the one who created you. Because self-love is an extension of God's love. When Jesus commands us, love your neighbor as yourself, he assumes we already know how to love ourselves. Do you not have good relationships with other people? It's probably because you're living by that. You love your neighbor as you love yourself. And you don't love yourself. So you don't love your neighbor. And you can't love your mom. And you can't love your partner. And you're having a really hard time loving your kids. Because you're loving your neighbor as you love you, but you don't love you. And if we neglect self-love, we can't fully extend love to other people. You're going to have a hard time. And in the biblical sense, this isn't being self-centered. This is being God-centered. This is taking serious consideration of the time and the energy and the effort that he put into making you and keeping you here. And if you're still here, that means that there's something about you he wants to share with the world. And that may just be your smile. That may just be the way that you give a presentation. It might be your special recipe that nobody else in your family can make. But because you have this disdain for who you are, you can't share the very good gift that God put in you with other people. And now we're all suffering. And who benefits from that? So when we talk about self-love, we want to look at Romans 8:1 because there's a reassurance here. We talked about condemnation in episode number 2. When you feel this guilt and this shame that comes from condemnation, we want to relinquish that. If you continue to see yourself as this just downright negative thing that doesn't deserve any good thing in the world, I'm curious as to how your prayers sound. Because how do you petition God when you've already said that you're the worst thing he ever made? Why would you say that about him? Does he literally, if you look in Genesis, everything he made, when he was done, he said, that's good. I like it. Picasso. He didn't say that part. He just said it's good. Right? When he made you, he said the same thing. But then every time you look at you, you say bad news bears. I, as a therapist, what I'm curious about is why, right? Because if the original idea is that you're good and he wants you to take care of this good thing that he made, somewhere along the way you learned that that's not true. Who taught you that? Who taught you that there's something wrong with the way you look? Who taught you that your body type is the wrong body type? Who taught you that the way that you communicate is bad? That's what, but I'm not your therapist. I'm your friend, the talking head on your YouTube. But if you go to therapy, I think that that's a good place that we can all start, because the psychological science provides us tools for understanding identity and self-care and self-love and how it impacts our mental health. But all of this, and I love all of this, don't get me wrong, I've dedicated my life to all of this. This is still surface level. This is still not digging deep into you. Now we dig deep into me, but when was the last time you dug deep into figuring out why your insecurities are the way they are? Who said it? Why did they say that? Were they projecting their own insecurity and then you pick that thing up? You say, you know what? I think I like this. I'll carry it around. Release it. Let it go so that you can be in right relationship with yourself. I usually preface this, but I'm not going to do it. Let's just dig. Okay, let's just dig. No need to sugarcoat what this segment is about. I've been chronically insecure pretty much my whole life. Okay, I can't say my entire life because I have like very short memories of me in daycare. Like I was that girl. At 4 years old, I was that girl. And then life happened to me at a very young age. And I can almost pinpoint, to be completely honest, the direct shots that were taken at my self-esteem and how they've manifested over time. But the truth is, there was target practice in high school. There was target practice in college. There was target practice in young adulthood. And there was a very strategic set of shots, might I add, that I realized what the Lord thinks about me and wants to partner with me on. That's where my insecurities really sit. Let's take my looks, for example. Let's go ahead and get into it. For young girls, this is usually the first arrow that's thrown at our mental health. And it was definitely the first arrow that was thrown at mine. Without a secure foundation on myself and on my relationship with the Lord, that shot at how you look can disrupt a lot of different things. My skin color and my height became an insecurity of mine in the 5th grade. And I remember exactly why. And I'm not going to say why because they may be watching this, but you know what you said, and it hurt me real bad. And I carried that thing around for years. I remember it like it was yesterday. One little comment from one stupid boy. And for the next 16 years, I believed in the narrative of colorism as a golden truth. And this is significant because I now realize that parts of my identity require me to be in front of people. I sit one-on-one for an hour with people, and they're looking at me directly in my face. I post videos on the internet of me just talking, and you're looking at my face. As long as the internet exists, these videos will exist. And if I were my adversary, if I had beef with me from the moment I was born, I would plant a seed of disdain for my appearance that would grow into an insecure behavior of hiding. It's brilliant for an adversary. So I thank God for the Holy Spirit because he delivers and he uproots those kinds of seeds. Because if I held on to that truth, I would have a really hard time being a therapist because there's a level of confidence you have to have going into a room, sitting with somebody for an hour straight. There's a huge level of confidence you have to post yourself talking on the internet. And if I fundamentally still believed in the ideas that were first planted by that individual and then perpetuated by future individuals, we wouldn't even be here. But let's dig a little bit deeper, a double dig, if you will. It's really hard to protect yourself when you don't know what you're protecting. When you don't understand how valuable a thing is, it's really hard to keep it safe. I mean, look at the security system of your local mall compared to the security system of the Pentagon. The value demands a higher level of security. And when you don't value you, you don't protect you, you don't care for you or steward your life well. Matthew chapter 7, verse 6 says, "Give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. This scripture offers wisdom about discernment and boundaries. Jesus warns against giving what is sacred, what is valuable, to those who will not appreciate it or respect it simply because they don't understand what it is. While this verse is often applied to, sharing the gospel, it has profound implications for how we view ourselves, how you set boundaries in your life. Jesus's use of the word pearls is no accident. Pearls were and still are a symbol of great value. In this context, you, me, us, we're the pearl, okay? Your time, your energy, your heart, it's sacred because they were created by God. Knowing this should shape how you see yourself and how you allow other people to treat you. In psychological terms, when we don't value ourselves, you will overextend. You will put yourself in situations that you probably shouldn't be in because you're looking for the value in the place rather than bringing value to a place. That is what breeds insecurity. And I'm guilty. This is a safe space, right? I'm guilty. Some of the friends that I've cared about and gone over and beyond for could really care less about a kid. And honestly, like at this point in my life, I can't be mad at them. Some of the boys that I've dated, I've loved. What I've offered to them and then realized like they hated me. And I laugh about it now. I used to cry about it, but I can laugh about it now. Me and my friends used to joke around. It was a trend on TikTok where it was like, I realized he hated me when. And we did this trend. And after a few rounds of that with my gal pals at Crafty Crab, I realized they stopped talking and I still had more to go. Like I had more examples of, I realized he hated me when, I realized he hated me when, and before I knew it, they stopped cracking crabs. And they were just looking at me talk. And they were like, Catherine, what do you mean? All these things happened to you? And I'm like, yeah, this was normal. And they were like, there's no way you should have ever allowed that. And well, the truth is, when you have no identity, when you have no awareness of what God says about you, you're desperate for a definition, even if it's a bad one. You'll take what you can get because you feel like that's the life you live. I just got to take the best that I can get. And after all that, guess who's still responsible for being in right relationship with me? After all these terrible definitions that I've gotten from people who don't even like me, guess who's still responsible to clean up the mess? Who's still responsible to put gas in the car? Who's still responsible to make sure that she gets an oil check on her heart and on her mind and on her soul? I'm still responsible, okay? And you're still responsible for yourself. It took a whole lot of rejection, heartbreak, for me to take my pearl seriously. And when I did, it changed my life. So how do we do this? How do you do this? Well, first, go ahead and cry. Okay. I don't recommend doing the trend. I realize that he hated me. I realize that they hated me with your friends if you have a lot of examples because they may get a little concerned. But after that, we want to spend some time reflecting on scriptures that affirm who you are in God's eyes. Write them down. Revisit them when you feel unsure of yourself. We did a good job of ironing this out in season 1, episode 2, Affirming with the Word. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. You're going to have to spend more time with God. You're going to have to spend more time with his voice, with his perspective, with the way that he sees you. You get around people that talk in that kind of way. And you also need to get around people who actually like you, like who you actually are at your base materials. Not when you're going over and beyond and you're at your max capacity, because then you have to be at max capacity forever for them to like you. That's exhausting. You're going to be burnt out, stressed out, or worse, you're going to crash out, which we don't want. So if I decided to befriend, or I don't know, date the boy, which I never do, the individual who ripped my skin color to shreds in the 5th grade, I would have no fighting chance at self-esteem. Okay. It would be name redacted here. It would be his esteem of me. So I hate to break it to you, Books. You're going to have to rip off the Band-Aid. You are going to have to either admit that you have no identity or you've placed the responsibility of defining yourself in someone else's hand. But that's okay, because we'll get more into this in the next episode of how you do right relationships with other people. We want to prioritize your body, your mind, and your soul. You can do this in several different ways. There's no perfect recipe. Some things work for other people. My friend, she loves to lift weights. Never. I'd never do that. I like to run. She'd never. Some people like to sit in silence and read a book to take care of themselves. Other people like to go to the beach. Some people need a nice little vacation to take care of themselves. Some people want to stay home and not tell anyone when they have a day off. Whatever works for you works for you. But if you're not working for you, it won't work for you. Does that make sense? Whatever works for you works for you. But if you don't work for you, it's not going to work out well for you. And here at the Life Well podcast, what I deeply care about most is you being well. And if you've got this whole right relationship with God thing down packed, but you're still running from yourself, you're running from another well. Yes, he's the ultimate well. He's living water. But we now know that there's a tiny little well living on the inside of you. And you're going to have to spend some time with her to figure out what's in there. I don't specifically have any homework for you this episode because I feel like the conversation in and of itself was quite a bit, right? If you're having to admit, you know what? I don't have an identity. I think that's enough work. So I'm not going to give you like a journaling topic or a list that you have to make, but I do encourage you to spend some time this week if you find that there's some rifts in your identity or some blocking beliefs you have about who you are or the way that you can get to who you want to be. I do encourage you to spend some time with those thoughts. I encourage you to spend some time in prayer and figuring out, well, what is my relationship with myself? What's the last thing I did for me? Now going to work is good, and you did that for you because you need to get paid. But what's the last thing you did for you because it felt great? I went to go get my toes done this past weekend, and when I got in there was a line. And he was like, you're going to have to come back in an hour. And I didn't really want to come back in an hour, but I really needed to get my toes done. So I came home, and before I left, I grabbed a book. I didn't have that book before, but I really wanted to read a book while I was there, so I didn't scroll on TikTok. That's taking care of myself. That's something, because I've been wanting to read this book since I bought it, but I didn't ever find the time. So I put myself in a situation, in an environment where I can do something that works for me, okay? So as you're processing all of these things this week, I want you to remember what works for you works for you. But if you're not putting in the work to take care of you, it's not going to work out well for you. So in between today and our next episode, as always, I hope that all this information found you well. I'm aware that sometimes these episodes don't find you well, and that's okay, because I hope that we become well. And prayerfully, we all stay well. I'm Catherine, and this is the Life Well podcast.